Hello, student. Today, topic of lecture, the blood vessel system, part 3. Next question. Parietal branches of the abdominal aorta. The common iliac artery, the internal and external arteries. The arteries of the lower extremities. Anastomosis of the arterial system. The parietal branches of the abdominal aorta. Abdominal part of the aorta, abdominal aorta. First branches located under the diaphragm, Arteria phrenica inferior, Arteria phrenica arterior inferior, supply blood to lumbar part of the diaphragm. It gives rise to small branch Arteria suprarenalis superior to the adrenal gland. Arteria phrenica inferior. Part branches. Next, arteries, the lumbar arteries, Latin Arteria lumbalis, Arteria lumbalis. Usually form on each side, fifth artery sometimes arises from Arteria sacralis mediana, corresponds to the segmental intercostal arteries of the thoracic region. They supply blood to the corresponding vertebra, the spinal cord, and the muscles and skin of the back and abdomen and anastomosis with the inferior intercostal and superior inferior epigastric arteries. The arteries lumbalis. What you see on the picture, this is lumbar artery. This is Arteria lumbalis. This is abdominal aorta. Muscles of abdomen, diaphragm. Next artery, the median sacral artery, Arteria sacralis mediana. It descends on the anterior midline of the two lumbar vertebrae, sacrum and coccyx, and terminate here as small branches in coccygeal body. Arteria sacralis mediana. Then the common iliac artery Arteria iliaca dextra, arteria iliaca sinistra. At the level of the fourth lumbar vertebra, the aorta divides into the right and left common iliac artery. The division occurs slightly to the left of the middle, as a result of which the right common iliac artery is 6-7 mm longer than left artery. Before the sacroiliac joint, Arteria iliaca communis divides into artery. The arteria iliaca externa, arteria iliaca interna, arteria iliaca externa dexter, arteria iliaca externa sinistra, arteria iliaca interna dextra, arteria iliaca interna sinistra. This arteria supplies the walls and organs of the pelvis with blood. The external iliac artery serving mainly the lower limb. Arteria iliaca communis, arteria iliaca externa, arteria iliaca interna. The internal iliac artery, arteria iliaca interna, arises from the distal end of the common iliac artery at the level of the sacroiliac joint. This artery descends into the true pelvis and extends to the superior edge of the greater sciatic foramen. Its division into parietal and visceral branches at the level of the superior edge of the greater sciatic foramen into two main branches: the posterior trunk, which give rise to artery iliolumbalis, arteria sacralis lateralis, and arteria glutealis superior, and the anterior trunk, from which the remaining branches of the internal iliac artery. This is posterior trunk and anterior trunk, branches of anterior trunk. The parietal branches of the internal iliac artery. The first branches, the arteria iliolumbalis, runs behind muscles psoas major into the iliac fossa, where it forms an anastomosis with a deep circumflex iliac artery rising from the external iliac artery. Arteria iliolumbalis. Next artery, arteria sacralis lateralis, arteria sacralis lateralis, supplies blood to the levator and the piriform muscles, musculus piriformis, and the nerve trunks on the sacral plexus, and gives off branches, the ramis spinalis, to the foramina sacrale pelvina. It anastomosis with the median sacral artery, arteria sacralis medianas. Arteria iliolumbalis, arteria sacralis lateralis, arteria sacralis medianus. You see arteria sacralis lateralis, this is plexus radialis, lateralis, arteria iliolumbalis, this is posterior trunk. Next branches, arteria glutea superior, arteria glutea superior, arteria glutea superior, you see arteria glutealis superior. It runs through the foramen suprapiriformis into the gluteal region and supplies the muscles glutealis. Next artery, arteria obturatorius, arteria obturatoria. Passes to the obturator foramen obturator. It runs with the nerve obturatorius to the thigh. The rami pubicus extends on the posterior surface of the pubic bone. And anastomosis with the ramus pubicus of the artery epigastric inferior. Epigastrica inferior. On leaving the obturator, canalis obturatorius, it supplies the external muscles obturator external and the adductor and give rise to ramus acetabularis. The ramus acetabularis penetrate the hip joint through the acetabula notch and supply the head on the femur and its ligament with blood. This is arteria obturatoria. You see arteria obturator. Arteria obturatorius. obturatoria. Next branches the inferior gluteal artery, arteria glutea inferior, arteria glutealis или glutea inferior. Passes through the foramen infrapiriformis with the internal pudendal artery, artery pudenda interna, and the sciatic nerve, and gives off a long slender branch, the companion artery of the sciatic nerve. On leaving the pelvic cavity, the inferior gluteal and other proximate muscles and anastomosing branches which joined with obturator, superior gluteal and medial circumflex femoral arteries. The visceral branches of the internal iliac artery are somewhat different in men and women. Arteria umbilicalis, arteria umbilicalis retain its lumen in the adult only for small distance from its origin to the site where it gives off the superior vesical artery. Superior vesical artery. The remaining segment of the trunk to the umbilicalis obliterates and transforms into the medial umbilical ligament. Next, the Euretic branches. Rami uretici go to the ureter. This may arise from umbilical artery. Next branches the superior vesical artery, arteria vesicalis superior, and arteria umbilicalis, arise from the unobliterated part of the arteria umbilicalis and branches out in upper part of urinary bladder. Next, the arteria vesicalis inferior, this is absent, arteria vesicalis inferior, it runs to the urinary bladder in men, to the prostate and seminal vesicle, and sometimes gives off here the arteria ductus deferens. In women, it also supplies the vagina, but can also be missing, and it's them replaced by arteria vaginalis. Arteria vaginalis. And this is absent on the picture. You see arteria vesicalis inferior. Arteria vesicalis inferior. This is, you see, arteria rectalis middle. This is arteria vesicalis inferior. Inferior. This is, you see, arteria vesicalis superior. This is superior, arteria vesicalis inferior. Next branches, the uterina artery, arteria uterina. Arteria uterina. Arteria uterina. Only in women, before it enters into ligamentum laterum uteri, the artery crosses over the ureter before it branches and supplies the uterus tuba, uterina, ovary, and vagina with its respective branches. Next, arteria vaginalis, only in women. It supplies the majority of the vagina and sometimes replaces the arteria vesicalis inferior. Arteria vaginalis and arteria vesicalis inferior. Arteria vaginalis, arteria vesicalis inferior. Arteria rectalis medialis, arteria rectalis medialis. Do you see it branches of the anterior trunk? This is what you see, arteria rectalis medialis. It runs above the pelvic floor to the rectum. The vessels is readily formed on both sides and can even the missing completely. Next, arteria pudenda interna. Arteria pudenda interna. It passes through the foramen infraperiforme and then through the foramen ischiadicus minus into the lateral wall of the fossa ischionalis. Here it gives off branches arteria rectalis inferior for the inferior anal canal, and then divides gender specifically into its superficial and deep terminal branches in order to supply the external genitalia. Arteria rectalis medialis and arteria pudenda interna latent. In men, the superficial Arteria rectalis inferior. This is arteria rectalis at media. Arteria rectalis, I don't know if you see. Arteria rectalis, superior. This is arteria rectalis inferior, arteria rectalis inferior, supplies the intestine and gives of the ramus scrotalis posterioris to the scrotum. The deep branches supply the penis with cavernosus bodies. This is artery, arteria bulbi penis, arteria dorsalis penis, arteria profunda penis. This is artery. In men, arteria rectalis inferior, ramus scrotalis posterior, deep branches, arteria bulbi penis, arteria dorsalis penis, and arteria profunda penis. What this is, you see artery. You see arteria pudenda interna. Branches arteria pudenda interna. With ramus scrotalis. In women, the arteria rectalis inferior runs to the intestine and gives of rami labialis, with arteria rectalis and rami labialis posterior to the labia. The deep branches supply the clitoris with its cavernosus bodies and the valval cavernosus body in labia majora, arteria bulbi, vestibuli, arteria dorsalis clitoridis, and arteria profunda clitoridis. You see arteria glutealis inferior branches muscles, and you see arteria rectalis inferior branches of pudendal. What you see? Inferior rectal arteries. This is arteria glutealis superior branches, arteria glutealis superior. This is inferior glutealis, arteria glutealis inferior, arteria glutealis superior. Muscles, glutealis. The external iliac artery. External iliac artery, arteria iliaca externa, begins at the level of the sacroiliac joint. It stretches down and forward along the medial edge of musculus psoas to inguinal ligament. When passes from under this ligament, when passes from under this ligament on the femur, it's called femoral artery. This is absent femoral artery. Arteria iliaca externa gives two branches, lateral branches. The inferior epigastrica artery and deep circumflex iliac artery. You see, this is arteria iliaca externa. This is branches arteria epigastrica inferior, arteria circumflexa ilium profunda. This is branches of arteria external, arteria iliaca external. The inferior, the arteria epigastrica inferior passes medially and then upward leads along the posterior surface of the muscles where it branches anastomose with arteria epigastrica superior from arteria subclavia sinistra. This is connect and form anastomosis. In its beginning segment, it bends around the medial edge of the deep orifice and the inguinal canal, and which point it gives of two branches, ramus pubicus, what you see, ramus pubicus, to the symphysis pubica, which anastomoses with arteria obturatoria, and arteria cremasterica, which leads to musculus cremaster and testes in men. This is absent. Rami epigastrica inferior, branches ramus pubis and ramus cremasterica. They are deep circumflex, arteria circumflexa ilium profunda, beginning around the iliac bone, passes parallel to the inguinal ligament, this is inguinal ligament, toward the iliac crest, posteriorly supply musculus transversus and the muscles iliaca with blood. What you see in next picture, arteria iliaca communis was divided to arteria iliaca interna, arteria iliaca externa. This is ligamentum inguinale, branches arteria iliaca externa, arteria circumflexa ilium profunda. This is a border. This is arteria iliaca externa. Above the iliaca externa begin arteria femoralis. Arterias of the lower extremity. extremity, and you see picture. This is arteries. The lower extremities are supplied with blood by iliaca communis. After it passes underneath the inguinal ligament, it continues into Arteria femoralis. This change to the dorsal side of the leg to the half of the knee, where it becomes Arteria poplitea. This is Arteria femoralis and in canalis adductorius. As it continues, it divided into artery for supplying the front side and lower leg and the dorsum and of the foot. Arteria tibialis anterior, this poplitea, arteria poplitea divided next artery. Arteria tibialis anterior and an artery supplying the back of the foot and foot. Arteria tibialis anterior, arteria tibialis posterior. Artery femoralis. This is ligamentum inguinalis. This is body. This is arteria external, arteria iliaca external. This is ligament inguinalis. This is, you see, arteria femoralis. This is enter in canalis adductorius. Arteria femoralis begins after leaving the lacuna vasorum beneath the inguinal ligament. Here it runs between the nerve femoralis, lateral, and vein femoralis. This medial, localization medial. The vessels run through the adductor canal and switch to the dorsal side of the leg. You see lacuna vasorum. What you see lacuna vasorum? This is nerve genitofemoralis. This is, you see, artery femoralis and vein femoralis. It is lacuna vasorum, lacuna musculatorum. This is ligamentum inguinalis. The arteria femoralis divided into 5 branches. Arteria epigastrica superficialis. Arteria epigastrica superficialis arises near the very beginning of the femoral artery and passes in front of the artery, passes in front of the inguinal ligament under the skin into the inguinal ligament under the skin into the region of the navel. Artery, Arteria circumflexa ilium superficialis. Encircles the iliac bone and proceeds along the inguinal ligament to the skin in the region of spina iliaca. Spina iliaca anterior superior. Spina iliaca anterior superior. This is symphysis, pubis symphysis. This is arteria epigastrica superficialis, arteria circumflexa ilium superficialis. This next. Arteria profunda femoris. What you see, arteria profunda femoris. Arteria profunda femoris. Is main vessels through this vascularization of the femur is accomplished. It's a thick trunk which originates from the posterior side of the artery femoralis, 4-5 centimeters below the inguinal ligament, lying first behind the femoral artery, then appearing from the lateral side, and give off numerous branches, rapidly diminishing in caliber. The arteria profunda supplies the toe both front and back. The branches of profunda femoris, arteria circumflexa femoris medialis, arteria circumflexa femoris medialis, it runs medial and posterior and continues to divide into rami ascendens for the anterior part of adductor and rami profundus and rami profundus to the posterior portion of the adductor, the ischiocrural muscles and femoral head. Rami acetabullaris, this is you don't see, to the hip joint connection to the rami acetabullaris of the arteria obturatoria and the ligamentum capitis femoris to the femoral head. Arteria circumflexa femoris lateralis It runs laterally under the musculus rectus femoris, and has following branches. Rami ascendens proximally to the gluteal muscles and femoral neck. Anastomosis with arteria circumflexa medialis. And arteria glutea superior and inferior. Rami transversus laterally to musculus vastus lateralis. This is musculus rectus femoris. Rami transversus, rami descendens to the musculus quadriceps femoris. This is, you see, branches of arteria profunda femoris. Arteriosi perforantes. What you see, arteriosis perforantes. It at right angles to the course of the arteria profundus femoris. They penetrate the adductor muscles and the ischiocrural muscles supply this at femoral shaft. In approximately 20%, the artery circumflexa femoris medialis and lateralis. What this is, you see, arteria profunda femoris, branches, two branches, arteria circumflexa femoris medialis and circumflexa femoris lateralis. They form an arterial ring around the neck of the femur and supply this and large parts of femoral head. What you see, rami acetabularis. And what you see, rami ascendens, transversus and descendens. This is rami of the artery circumflexa femoris lateralis. This creates an anastomosis network made up of branches of the arteria iliaca interna, arteria glutealis superior, arteria glutealis inferior, and branches of arteria profunda femoris, arteria circumflexa femoris medialis. This is form anastomosis. What you see, arteria pudenda interna. This is with help arteria circumflexa femoris anastomose two system, arteria glutea superior and inferior and arteria obturatoria and arteria profunda femoris. This is, you see, parietal branches of the arterial internal right anastomosis region with branches of the arteria femoralis. Arteria femoralis. This you see natural cadaver. This is, you see, this is arteria femoralis. Arteria femoralis. This is arteria profundus. This is arteria perforatus. This is what you see, arteria and femoralis, arteria femoralis. This is ligamentum inguinalis, vein femoralis, arteria femoralis. Femoralis. This is canalis adductorius. This is arteria profundus. Arteria profundus femoralis. Next, artery poplitea, arteria poplitea, with the exit from the adductor canal in the hiatus adductorius. The arteria femoralis extend to the arteria poplitea. This transverses the whole of the knee fossa poplitea until it divides at the level of the tibial condyles into arteria tibialis anterior, arteria tibialis posterior. It gives up another 6 branches and forms a vessel's network with this anterior to the knee joint, reta articularis genus. Reta articularis genus. Arteria superior medialis and lateralis genus. Arteria medialis and lateralis genus superior. Arteria superior medialis genus, arteria superior lateralis genus. And next, arteria inferior medialis genus, arteria lateralis genus. Arteria lateralis genus. Inferior medialis genus and arteria inferior lateralis genus. And you see next arteria suralis medialis. What you see, arteria suralis medialis and arteria suralis lateralis. This lateralis and medialis. You see arteria poplitea, fossa poplitea. What do you see? Arteria poplitea, and you see arteria poplitea muscles, muscular branches. Muscular branches. This is muscular branches of popliteal muscles. What you see? Muscles branches. Muscles branches. Now what you see, this is medial superior genicular artery. Genicular artery. Artery medialis, this is lateralis. And what you see, anterior, arteria tibialis anterior and arteria tibialis posterior. Значит, anterior, posterior, popliteal divided to artery. Anterior tibial artery and posterior tibial artery. Arteria tibialis anterior penetrate the membrana interossea cruris and runs along this extensor compartment distally. It is then accompanied by neva fibularis profundus. It forms the arteria dorsalis pedis. Arteria dorsalis pedis at the levels of the ankle joint. At the lower leg, arteria tibialis anterior divides into 4 branches. Arteria recurrent tibialis anterior and posterior run before and after passage through the membrana interossea back to the knee joint. Arteria malleolaris anterioris, medialis and lateralis. Arteria malleolaris anterioris, lateralis and medialis. To vascular network of the inner and outer ankle. Arteria dorsalis pedis, it continues the direction of the arteria tibialis anterior to medial side of the dorsum of the foot and divided into total branches. Arteria tarsalis lateralis and medialis. Tarsalis lateralis, arteria tarsalis medialis. To the medial and lateral margin of the foot. Arteria arcuata, it arches over the bases of the metatarsal bones and divides into arteria metatarsalis, which are involved in supply the tooth via arteria digitalis dorsalis. Arteria plantaris profunda, it penetrates the first interphalangeal space and anastomosis with the arcus plantaris profundus of the sole of the foot. Arteria tibialis posterior. Arteria tibialis posterior. Continues the course of the arteria poplitea. It accompanies the arteria neva tibialis. This is what yellow color. Neva tibialis between the deep and superficial calf muscles distally behind the inner ankle, which it supplies with rami malleolaris medialis and divides into the rami calcanea to the medial side of the heel. It runs through the new vascular passageways of the malleolar canal toward the sole of the foot. The main branches is the Arteria Fibularis, It runs along behind the fibula parallel to the Arteria tibialis. Parallel Arteria tibialis. Posterior distally and divided into rami malleolaris lateralis to the external ankle and rami calcanea to the lateral side of the heel, and rami calcaneo medial and lateral form areta calcaneum. Arteria fibularis. The main branches is the Arteria fibularis. It run along behind the fibula, parallel Arteria fibularis, Arteria tibialis posterior, distally, and divides into rami malleolaris lateralis to the external ankle and rami calcanea to the lateral side of heel. On the sole of the foot, artery tibialis posterior is divided into two terminal branches, artery plantaris medialis. It runs medial to musculus flexor digitorum brevis and connects to the arcus plantaris profundus. What do you see? Arteria plantaris lateralis, with arteria tibialis posterior. This is, you see, arteria plantaris lateralis. It runs underneath the musculus flexor digitorum brevis and forms arcus plantaris profundus. This deep arch, a superficial arch is not usually formed, is located below the base or the basis of the ossimetatarsy and divides into the Arteria metatarsalis, plantaris with the Arteria digitalis, plantaris, communis, and the Arteria digitalis, plantaris propria, and the propria. What you see, poplitea artery, this is artery peroneal artery, artery tibialis posterior. This is fossa poplitea. Their anastomosis provide evidence and the unity of the arterial system. Anastomosis between branches of the major arteries, aorta, carotid arteries, subclavian and iliac arteries, and other, that function as independent vascular system are called intrasystemic anastomosis. Anastomosis between branches of the single large arterial trunk within the limits of the artery are called intrasystemic anastomosis. Значит, intersystemic anastomosis and intrasystemic anastomosis. You see a table of next anastomosis. Anastomosis of arteries, the system of the arteria subclavia. This is in table you see arteries with found anastomosis, branches of arteries with which found anastomosis, location of the anastomosis. Next table, anastomosis of the brachial girdle of the three upper limb arteries. And next, anastomosis of the arteries of the thoracic, abdominal and pelvic cavities. This is next table, anastomosis, the arteries of the pelvic and arteries of the lower limb. You must know all the anastomosis, and you will anastomosis on the practical lesson. You can use this table for study anastomosis in practical class. Thank you for attention, student. Goodbye.